It's not easy being green.
Hi everybody, welcome to another Broken Meeple video. I'm Luke Hector and this is Beyond the Base Game, a little mini-series where I talk solely about expansions. I do reviews and top 10s, but not a lot of people will talk about the expansion to a game, but yet the expansions are the things I look forward to the most. Yes, a new game comes out, but we might have already seen it might not be good, it might disappoint. That can happen with expansions too, but if your favourite game gets new content, surely that gets you more excited, right? And so this one was hit or miss on that front, actually. As a bit of background, I really love Caverna, okay? Caverna is, I think, my second favourite Uri Rosenberg game, as far as I'm aware. I like Fields of Isle more, but Caverna, love it. And as much as on the recent live stream I talked about Agricola, I respect it, even though I don't overly like it, it's more the fact that I don't like the fact that that was too punishing, too restrictive, but I love the theme and I love the style of it. But Caverna basically came along and said, bye-bye Agricola, you motherfucker! Here's the more free-form version. Here's where you can actually decide, I want to do nothing but farm sheep. Good. Here's a bunch of points. Here's all the options. Here's a bunch of buildings. Here's all this cool stuff you can do with your farm. Done properly. As much as I like Fields of Isle more, this was really cool. And Fizzgig, our monster for the day, is sitting on top of Forgotten Folk, the first expansion that came out of Caverna, which I don't think I ever did a video for, because I think I got that before I did this mini-series. But suffice to say, in shorthand, Forgotten Folk, love it. If you love Caverna, not necessarily before you've started learning the game, but if you've played Caverna once or twice and you think, oh yeah, this is so good, I want to get more for this game, get Forgotten Folk. It is amazing. It's asymmetrical races with different powers and different ways of playing. You've got everything from like little goblins that you can hire to stone golems that can only eat rock.
Get your motor running.
Halfling farmers and that. It's a brilliant expansion. Love it, love it, love it. So when this one got announced, I thought, I don't know, there's already a big enough game already. Do I need another expansion? It was hinted for a while it was going to be co-op. I'm surprised that, I wonder when that changed. But Frantic Fiends is the newest one, and it took a long time to come out. It was a few delays, and it started to reach that point where I was kind of like, the excitement's kind of calmed down, really. It's a bit like the new Avatar movie, funny enough. You know, some people are like, oh yeah, I love Avatar, and they might have been looking forward to the next movie, but after, what, a decade or something since the last one came out, I think most people have just grown tired and bored of waiting. This one kind of felt a bit like that at first, but it came out, and I thought, let's grab it at Essen and see what it's like. What you're doing in Frantic Fiends is you're playing a very different version to Caverna than you might be used to, and that could be the positive or negative for you. Basically with Caverna, you're doing the same sort of thing of, right, I've got to do my farming, get me dwarfs, grow vegetables, you know, build mines, build rooms, that kind of thing. But with Frantic Fiends, you now have to contend with Orcs. So everybody has got 3 Orcs that sit on their board at the start of the game in the forest area, and a 4th one comes out eventually. And the idea is that you're supposed to essentially do what you do normally in Caverna, but you've got to contend with these Orcs. Every round, or like every so often, sorry, they will like maneuver around your fields, and they will either pillage stuff off them, or they will attempt to reach your cave entrance, at which point they'll breach and they'll go in and they'll either steal dwarfs, steal rubies, nick donkeys, or whatever. But basically, they're there to cause a bit of a problem. So how do you contend with them? Well, you can arm your dwarfs, and believe me, this game wants to give you a lot more weapons because it gives you a lot more adventurer tokens in the bag. Or you can set traps for them, which essentially function a bit like rooms that you put outside. In these traps, like, I mean, we've got like a spike, spear trap, feed trap, trap net, multiple trap nets, booby trap, which is kind of weird. You'd think every trap is a booby trap, so why is one specifically called booby trap? I don't quite get it, but, you know, pitfall. But you can lay them out in order to either kill them stone dead, or knock them down a peg, or even more interesting, you can actually reduce them to a strength to the point where you can actually befriend the orc, and they become one of your workers. A slightly lesser version of a dwarf, obviously. Dwarfs rule. Rock and stone. But on top of that, though, you could just let them roam, but of course they're going to cause a bit of havoc, so maybe you just want to go and twat them on the head. You know, you grab a weapon, you get your dwarf, you go there and go boom. It reduces your weapon down a knock, but you get rid of the orc. And when you get rid of the orc, there's a bunch of bonuses that you can possibly get. The game basically gives you a setup where you randomize from quite a decent selection of tiles, I've got to give them credit for, a bunch of different, oh, here we go, 1, 2, 3, I think there's 3 in each. So you'll essentially have 3 rows of bonuses. Different orcs trigger different bonuses, and as soon as you get rid of an orc, then boom, stick it down and I get something like 2 dogs, 3 wood. I get another token if I've got room in my thing. I can use an unoccupied action space. I can get some more food. I can arm a door for the level 5 weapon. You know, this is just on these 3 tiles. There's quite a few more. You know, it's not bad variety when you think about it. But, yep, you can mix and match these to your heart's content, and basically it's an incentive to get rid of them. But another big deal that this expansion, well, I say adds, it kind of subtracts. Remember in the normal Caverna game that you get all those buildings, those wealth of options, you're like, oh yeah, this is really cool, look at all these massive buildings I can do, but where do I even start? Oh, I don't know. Well, most of them aren't in this game. Most of them are cut out. You essentially now have, again, a very good amount of variety in randomized column tiles for rooms. You basically, whoop, here we go, where do we put these down? Where did we put these down? Oh yeah, some buildings. Here we go. That's what I'm looking for. So you get a few buildings alongside here, and these ones I think are specific to like this expansion, so they come out. But then you also get a few more that you have to put out. So you've got some traps that you can put out, but some more dwellings. You know, a couple of extra rooms depending. So you'll have essentially. I can't find another one. There's one in the box somewhere, but basically there should be a 3rd one here. But you'll only have about this many rooms. That's not a lot of rooms. This plus the traps. So that massive board of rooms you had before is now condensed to a smaller, slightly more accessible amount of rooms, but also a bit more, shall we say, variety from game to game, because you don't see every room in every game now, which is positive and negative. I kind of like having all those options, but for those of you who thought that was a little bit too overwhelming, well, you're in luck, because now you only have so many. In fact, the yellow rooms, the ones that you score points for, you can't even access them until you've dealt with all 4 of your orcs. So there's a bit of a race aspect there, although more on that a little bit later. So okay, you're farming, you're dealing with some orcs, but you're doing essentially what you did in Caverna before. So where's the catch? There's a lot of them, I'm afraid, and this is going to be a very divisive expansion, okay? You're either going to love this expansion, or you're going to hate it. I don't think you're going to be somewhere in the middle with this, because whether you like this expansion or not is going to depend entirely on what you wanted from Caverna. When you bought Caverna, the reason you enjoy Caverna, why do you enjoy it? Why do you play this and not Agricola? The reason I play Caverna over Agricola is because I want it to be less punishing, less restrictive, but I want to have freedom to choose what path for victory I want and all the options available. This expansion does the complete opposite of everything I just said. It makes the game tighter, like very tight. It increases the necessity to feed your people because you have another harvest very early on in the game, and believe me, that's a tempo shift and a half. You've got the 4 orcs running around and nicking all your stuff. You got to contend with them. You don't have as many rooms, so you can't get your favourites that you might have had before. But it basically brings it closer to what Agricola is. More punishing, more restrictive, more tighter. If that's what you wanted for Caverna, then fine. This expansion could actually be one you really like. But then if that's what you wanted for Caverna, why don't you just go play Agricola? You know, that's what Agricola was. So why do you want this instead of Agricola? It doesn't make any sense to me. But for me, this expansion has, besides taking the Caverna to a place I didn't want it to go, there's also quite a few other problems that I'm like, seriously, that got by? Or seriously, that's an Rosenberg thing? One in particular, these movement cards. So at certain times, basically, when you have the, the weird harvest from before, the one that's not quite a full harvest, now you've got these 4 event boards that you essentially do in order, but it tells you to draw a certain amount of movement cards. It tells you that you can bribe orcs, you can push them by spending resources, so you can either bribe the orc to get their strength down if you don't want to use a weapon, although trust me, that's very expensive to do in resources. But then you can also push an orc.
Why are you poking me again?
When it moves around, you can nudge him onto a trap. Okay, great. The problem is, if you're doing pushing, you're spending resources, which means if someone else is not pushing, they're not spending as much. But the movement cards, this I just don't get. It's random. It's entirely random. Basically, there's a 1, 2s, and 3s, and depending on the orcs, everybody draws a random card, and the orc moves in various directions. It can move forwards, diagonally down, it can move multiple spaces, 1, 2, or 3, it could even go backwards. And the only slight restriction is that if it hits the wall, it moves alongside the walls until it gets closer to the breach. So it's kind of migrating towards your cave most of the time, but then occasionally it might just go backwards in the complete opposite direction. This I think is moronic as a mechanic. I'm sorry, I really do not like these.
Oh, yes! I hate this! It is revolting!
The game Caverna is already, like, the only bit of luck that should exist in Caverna is the flipping of the action cards. Like, maybe they don't come out in the order that you want, same for the harvest. But this affects everybody, okay? This is a complete random element that could have been handled better, I think. Because, firstly, you know, if you've got these orcs, right, and they head towards your base at hyperspeed, you're on the back foot really early on, and it's very difficult to pull back because, as I said, this game makes the game tighter. Having that extra harvest in the early game is such a killer to your tempo. You know, normally you'd be building stuff up, but instead you've got to feed your people already, and you've barely even started. It's like, what do I do from here? But the thing is also you might think, well, okay, you can bribe or push them, can't you? Bribing is a lot of resources, okay? I don't have 8 stone to spend to get an 8 strength orc down to 0 strength. But then, okay, why don't you push an orc? You know, will you push him onto a trap if it moves alongside it? Because bearing in mind, these only go on a square, so the orc could literally just go round it. Okay, I could push him. But that resource that I'm spending, player next to me doesn't have to spend it, because the orc went into his trap, but it went around mine. So I'm unlucky, and I have to spend more resources. Resources which are now harder to get hold of. You see where I'm going with this? But, you know, you might even have a time where your orcs go towards your gate, and then another card comes up and they go backwards. And it's like, oh sweet, I don't have to put up with them for a whole turn. And the other player next to you was like, oh, but they've already breached my place, and I couldn't exactly kill 3 of them at once. What was I supposed to do? I don't like these cards at all. There must have been a better way of doing this. You know, you're throwing in a random element that can be very punishing if, like, you draw bad luck, and it's in a game that's already tighter and more punishing. The two do not go together, and so this really is a big off-put already. I'm also not a fan of the fact that you don't have most of the buildings now. You know, you can say, all right, it's nice that each game you have a different set of buildings. Yeah, but I liked having all the buildings available. You know, what was wrong with having all those buildings? You know, you've got a Grickler if you want to have the cards and have a different set of cards each round. You know, why not do it that way? What else am I not a fan of? The traps. The traps cost a lot to build, okay? They can be, well, some of them can be effective. Some of them I think are just rubbish. But the traps are on your board. They cost a lot of resources to make, and they're only worth 2 points, plus the possibility of detaining an orc. I'd rather spend the resources on rooms. You know, rooms that actually get me lots of cool stuff in that, but by the time you've built a couple of traps, you really don't have a lot of resources spare to do what you would normally do in the game. And so, the theme-wise, you're taking me away from the bit I love most about Caverna, all the farming stuff, and putting me on orc tower defense, which is not really what I wanted in the first place. It makes adventuring a lot more, like, prominent in the game. I mean, you could do without adventuring in Caverna. I won the game plenty of times without doing adventuring. In this game, you have to do adventuring. You don't get a choice. You will not be able to bribe and push your way out of all these orcs. It's going to cost too many resources and too much time. It's a lot easier to simply just get a bit of ore, go and, you know, beat up an orc with a weapon. Oh yeah, the weapon's gone, but as long as you don't disintegrate it completely, you've still got the weapon there, and beat the orc in one hit. It's just easier to do that. Although now they've made rubies and ore harder to get hold of, because now when you mine them, they stay on the board and you have to get a donkey in a different phase of the game in order to collect them. Again, more punishing, more restrictive. Not a fan. And to top it off, guess what, people? You cannot combine Caverna Frantic Fiends with Forgotten Folk.
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
It says explicitly in the rulebook, don't do it. Where does it say here? This is a standalone expansion. It requires the base game to play, but it's not compatible with the first expansion. What? The Forgotten Folk should not be combined with it. The quirks of the different folk in the first expansion might put certain players at a major disadvantage when playing with the second expansion. What, you mean your movement cards don't put people at a major disadvantage already? And this is what you're worried about? So, you've managed to take a game that had one of the best expansions for a game ever and say, forget that expansion, who wants to play Forgotten Folk? You want to play Frantic Fiends now. No, I want to play Forgotten Folk. I don't want to play Frantic Fiends, I want to play this one. And you're basically telling people not to play the great expansion for it. That doesn't make any sense. You know, why would you do that? So, as you can tell, you know, not a fan. And do you want to add more rules to the game as well? I mean, this is the rulebook. There's a lot of text in there. There's a lot you've got to absorb. You know, Forgotten Folk didn't have anywhere near this many rules for it. This one I know has got more. And then you've already got a lot of rules in Caverna, so you're just adding more complication by a fair margin here. Overall, not a fan. This is an expansion I'm never pulling out again. I'm sticking with what I got. This is what I liked. This is immediately leaving the collection. No interest whatsoever. So it's not as bad as something like, say, the first expansion to Isle of Skye. Oh, blimey, does anybody remember that one? That one literally changed the game and turned it on its head and was horrendous. And if you want Vindication 101, then the fact that the big box of Isle of Skye does not include that expansion in the box vindicates what I said about that expansion. It was garbage. This one isn't garbage. I can see why people would like it, but I'm clearly not the target market. You know, if you wanted Caverna to be tighter and restrictive and all that lot, and you don't mind the randomness, this will be an expansion you will like, and I have seen some positive praise. But for me, don't like it. This one, 3 out of 10, bad. It's not garbage, but it's pretty bad. I got a little enjoyment out of it, I guess, but mainly just because it was something different, and at least I was playing Caverna partially, which was the bit I was enjoying. But basically everything that this expansion threw in, with the one minor exception that it meant that you didn't have to stare at a ton of buildings at the start of the game. That's literally probably the only thing it does a little bit better than the original. But everything else in here, from the cards to the traps to the adventuring focus to the new rooms and the orcs themselves, everything just felt like a detraction for me. So yeah, a 3 out of 10, bad, but for others, it could be good. So be interesting to get your thoughts down below. So that's it from me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please remember you can thumb up the video or thumb it up on Board Game Geek if you can. It'd be great to make it into the hot review section. But again, like I said, get your comments down below. I want to know what you thought of Caverna and Forgotten Folk. So what's your opinion of this? Have you played it? Was it, like me, a complete dud, or was it actually really good for you? If so, why? What was it about this that changed it from Caverna that isn't enough like Agricola that made you really enjoy it? Because I think this review could do with getting both sides of the coin, both perspectives. So if you did like this expansion, get your thoughts down below and let us know why, because I think it will inform a lot of people's decision. But for me, nope, no likey, this me likey. Okay, so until next time, you can check out more content on the show, including the recent review I did for Meadow Downstream on the Beyond the Base Game series. Failing that, check out the live stream I did with Dan from Chairman on the Board, where we talk about our games we dislike but respect. Spoiler alert, yes, Agricola is on that list. You'll just have to see where it landed and on whose list. Oh, it's mine. Okay, fair enough. Spoiler already. So take care, and remember, regardless of whether you like Caverna for its farming or for killing orcs, it's still only a game. So bye for now, take care.
It's not easy being green.